Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. So this is going to be part 2 of our video on market manipulation in the antiques and collectibles trade. Now in part 1, I pretty much set up the dynamics for this video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you prime examples of market manipulation in the antiques and collectibles trade and how it's similar and also differs from Wall Street. Remember guys, a lot of these same tactics that are applied to the antiques and collectibles trade pretty much originated in the securities and exchange markets, meaning a lot of people that are privy to how market manipulation works already are educated in economics, finance, they have an understanding of the fundamentals, and they also know the antiques and collectibles trade, which makes some of these individuals very dangerous. I want to also state this before I begin. I am not a lawyer. So a lot of the topics that I'm going to discuss in this particular video, I don't care if they're illegal or legal. In most cases in the antiques and collectibles trade, it's almost anything goes. There is no governing body. There's no oversight commission. There's no equivalent to the SEC in the antiques and collectibles trade. Now, there are certain markets that are regulated when we talk about the market for collectible and antique ivory, other related products of that nature. And we also talk about firearms, even certain weapons and antiquities are regulated overall. But for the vast majority of the trade, it is the wild, wild west out there. As long as you're not doing anything downright illegal, meaning you're not listing something on eBay, selling it, and then not sending it to the buyer, or you're not listing something for sale, misrepresenting the item, and then sending a different item to the overall buyer. That would be wrong as well. Both those tactics are punishable by law, obviously. That being said, we're going to begin at the beginning, and I'm just going to go through and give you certain examples as to how a lot of these markets are being manipulated at present time. The first one I want to talk about is the advent of collecting pools, investing pools, even speculator pools. Now, on a lot of popular collecting forums, you are able to send private messages to groups or individuals. That's where a lot of these speculator or investing pools come to be. What happens is somebody has an interest in the price and has access to a certain collectible, whether it be Amazing Spider-Man 129, a Pokemon first edition card, a Great Magic the Gathering reserve list card, some type of item that they have their eye on. And they reach out and they start communicating with other dealers, other speculators, other investors, and they collude to either create further demand for that product or suppress supply, which would in turn, if it works properly, cause the price to increase on the secondary market. Now, I can name about 10 different times over the last 3 years where I've known or had inside information that this was happening. And this has affected almost all of your popular pop culture-based collectibles. Vintage toys, vintage comic books, Pokemon cards, Magic the Gathering, pretty much any market where the barrier to entry is quite low. It is very hard to apply some of these tactics to more sophisticated markets, but make no mistake, those markets are also manipulated, whether we're talking coins, currency, high-end art, collectible first edition books, historical documents, autographs. All those markets are manipulated in some form or another. Make no mistake. Now, in my opinion, collectible pools or investing pools, whatever we're calling them, are really not that bad overall. I mean, this type of stuff has been happening since the dawn of the trade. Let's be honest, even before the internet, dealers pretty much work together to corner certain aspects on the antiques and collectibles market. More on cornering in a minute. But I just wanted to give you an idea that thanks to the internet, thanks to YouTube, thanks to all these collecting forums, and I don't care if you're talking about the CGC comic book collecting forum, I don't care if you're talking about what was Nintendo Age, I don't care even if you're talking about Brick Picker or any forum devoted to antique bottles or vintage toys. All of these markets have people like this that enter into collecting pools or investing pools or speculating pools in one form or another, even if it's just dealers colluding together, which, by the way, is not unethical. A lot of dealers need to trade inventory with one another. That's a common practice. Next, I want to talk about collectible bashing. This is something that's very popular on online collecting forums, whether you realize it or not. Somebody will come in on the Bronze Age forum for CGC collectible comic books on that particular forum. And people will be talking about Incredible Hulk 181, Amazing Spider-Man 129, or Giant Size X-Men 1, or even X-Men 94. And somebody will come in, oh, Bronze Age comic books suck. They're the worst. And you'll start to see some posts, if you look carefully enough, where, well, look at this comic book. It's dropped in price this much. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Now, to be fair, could it be somebody who just doesn't like Bronze Age comic books? Yes. Could it be somebody who's not a fan of Giant Size X-Men 1, Incredible Hulk 181, or Amazing Spider-Man 129? Yes. But most overall, there are people that operate in this fashion. This is why I don't like a lot of threads where little Timmies are coming onto these forums and they're asking advice on a certain comic book. Because 50% of the advice is going to be authentic, another 50% of the advice is going to be very biased. And that's what you really have to be careful with. For instance, I would never invest in a comic book that was published past 1975. The reason being, there's too many on the market. It's very hard to have a grasp of that particular market because after 1975, even in some cases before 1975, a lot of comic books were hoarded in mass because in 1970, the first Overstreet price guide hit the marketplace. And that caused a lot of speculators to hoard up a lot of these copies of comic books. Well, even Amazing Spider-Man 129, Incredible Hulk 181, Giant Size X-Men 1, yeah, they're great books. They do have investment potential on the high end of the grade spectrum, usually 9.6 or better. I know a lot of you hate me for saying that, but again, you got to be in the top 15% if you want to invest in those particular items. That being said, there's a lot of people that hoarded those particular books. There's a lot of speculators and investors that went after them. So they are not rare. They are just in demand. Now, when we talk about 1960s comic books, that market is more established than the market for 1970s comic books overall, which is more established than the market for 1980s comic books, which is more established than the market for 1990s comic books overall. There are some exceptions. For instance, if you have a first print of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1, that is a book that is very low in supply, very high in demand, has a lot of organic demand. No question, that is a key book of the 1980s. Now, let's talk about the pump and dump scheme. To be fair, the pump and dump scheme doesn't really happen that much anymore in the market for antiques and collectibles because it's very hard to calculate demand with all the speculators that are coming in some of these more esoteric markets that are trying to go mainstream. Whether we're talking about vintage video games, graded video games, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, pop culture collectibles, whatever it is, it's hard to keep your pulse on the market and gauge it properly in order to effectively put through a successful pump and dump scheme. Most people that try this end up failing. There are some examples, and I'm not going to go into them in this video, where I have been in contact with certain collectors who have pulled this off. They reached out to me and they said, Sean, do you believe this worked? And in my opinion, honestly, I cannot believe how some of these scams, which is really what they are, or schemes, have literally worked in a lot of these markets to the point where people have made $10,000, $20,000 in a matter of 30, 60, 90 days. It does happen. Just keep in mind, that is a very hard scheme to pull off. You have to be very patient, very educated, and have a very, very prominent plan to do this. Next, we're going to talk about runs and ramping the market. Full disclosure, I'm guilty of this. Let me explain what this is in my opinion, and then I'll give you also the blanket definition. I log on to heritage.com and I'm bidding in one of their coin auctions. And I see an 1882 Carson City Morgan Silver Dollar in MS66 condition sitting on the market being bid up to $700, $800. I will purposely put in a bid to maybe $900, maybe in some cases $1,000 to create a floor on that particular collectible. Now, here's the truth. I already own several 1882 Carson City Morgan Silver dollars in MS65 on up. I really don't care if I win another one. I don't really want it, but if I win it, I will gladly pay and keep it and be in sync with the auction terms set forth on the Heritage website. That being said, a lot of people ask me, why do you do that? It's simple. A lot of dealers, a lot of collectors do this. It's to create a floor on that particular item. There's nothing unethical. There's nothing illegal about it. Where you can get into a gray area on this, let's say that you have a thing for giant size X-Men 1. So every time a giant size X-Men 1 9.4 comes up for bid, you bid $1,800 on it just to ensure that there is at least a floor price of $1,800 on that comic book. Well, if you do happen to win the bid one time and you don't pay for that particular book that you won, that now creates a moral or ethical dilemma because the auction house is still going to come at you wanting their money because you won the bid fair and square. There are a lot of collectors, a lot of speculators, a lot of investors, and a lot of dealers bidding this stuff up to set a floor price. I really hate to tell that to a lot of the people out there that come into this market naive, thinking just because they want and they love the first appearance of the Punisher and they want to own that book, they think that everybody else who has that book is not bidding in that particular auction and on that item. They are sorely mistaken. There's a lot of people that try to set a floor price for a lot of these items. This is especially true in CGC comic books because there's something called GP analysis, graded price analysis, which is a service that tracks through certain dealers and auction sites the price that certain comic books are sold at in a particular grade. That information can be manipulated. More on that in another video. But for those of you that really think that no one's manipulating that information, meaning if an Incredible Hulk 181 comes up for bid and it's selling for a low price, and you see somebody go in there and put a high price all of a sudden on that particular item, it's because they don't want the price to fall under a certain amount, guys. This is what I mean when I talk about mass speculation and market manipulation in a lot of these pop culture-based collectibles. I did a video on Pokemon not too long ago. There's still people all butthurt leaving me comments saying, Sean, it's not a bubble, it's organic demand. I can tell you firsthand, it is not entirely organic demand. That does not mean I don't think that Pokemon is going to become an established collectible and people aren't going to make money in that market. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying, there's a lot of market manipulators prying their craft in a lot of these markets that the average person just looks at and goes, oh, a holofoil Team Rocket Charizard went from $400 to $1,200. Therefore, it's worth $1,200. That's not true at all, guys. The market's manipulated. You can't go from $400 to $1,200 in a matter of months and think that's just due to organic demand. It's not. That is completely ridiculous. I don't care who you listen to on YouTube. If they tell you that, they have no understanding of speculative bubbles. It doesn't work that way. So let's talk about a wash trade. Wash trade is pretty much the manipulator pretty much sells and repurchases the same item. Now, you may ask, why the hell would a market manipulator spend the time to both buy and sell an item, especially if it's going to sell for the same price? Well, it's to create demand. Because what happens is when people search completed and sold listings on eBay or on auction sites, they think that information is gospel. Now, to be fair, yes, it is prudent that you analyze that data if you want to be a successful collector, speculator, or investor. But you should not take that data as gospel. It is manipulated. There are people that if their cost basis after they list a card on eBay with all fees, eBay fees, shipping, whatever, they'll list it for $250 just to break even on that card because it shows in the completed search listings that it's sold for $250. So little Timmies and Poindexters out there, they develop price memory and they go, well, that card's worth $250. Until anymore, guess what? If they see it selling at $200, $225, they'll bid it up to $250. So pretty much they're doing the job of the market manipulator for them. Price memory is quite real. That's why when speculative bubbles break, it hurts the most unsophisticated speculators and investors the most. It's due to price memory. There's a lot of people that love to argue with me that, Sean, a box of Skyridge that's selling for over 15 grand right now, that's all organic demand. Yes, I agree with you. There is some organic demand there. Skyridge, in the world of Pokemon, is a very scarce booster box. That being said, when a box of Skyridge goes from 8,000 to 15,000 in a matter of months, you got to kind of look at it more closely and see what's going on there. Could it easily go from 15 to 30? Yes, but it could just as easily go from 15 down to 10 or down to 5. And that's what nobody wants to talk about. Market manipulators probably won't let that happen at present time because they're going to be manipulating the market for their own gain, and they want those items to look like they have a set floor or ceiling in this case, where they're not going to go any lower than a certain amount, because that's what attracts speculators to these markets. They all come running and they go, hey, look at that. Those last 3 boxes of Skyridge or whatever we're talking about sold for $15,000, $16,000 respectfully. Therefore, that item's worth $15,000 to $16,000. Markets don't work like that. There's no fundamentals. We compare this to Wall Street. You can look at the fundamentals of a stock. You can look at the PE ratio. You can look at alpha, beta. You can look at earnings per share. You can look at quarterly earnings. What did Wall Street analysts expect the company to earn in that quarter versus what they reported? All this is fundamentals. You can look at debt levels. You can analyze if that stock should be trading at $50 a share, or should it really be a $30 stock, or in some cases an $80 stock. You can do all that with financial information. The antiques and collectibles trade does not work the same way because all these items are speculative. You don't need to buy a box of Skyridge. There's no understanding or fundamental understanding except when we assess supply and current demand as to what a box of Skyridge should sell for over the long term, over the aggregate average. Wall Street's different. There's fundamentals that all these companies have to report and adhere to as a result. There's regulations in that. So always understand that. Next, let's talk about price fixing. Believe it or not, price fixing does happen in the antiques and collectibles trade. And right now that I said that, you're going to see people leave comments if this video gets enough views that, Sean, price fixing is illegal. In the antiques and collectibles trade, believe it or not, it's not always illegal. It depends on the circumstance. I'm not a lawyer. I do consult with the lawyers for some of this stuff. I would advise you to do the same if you have a question on that. All is what price fixing is attempting to fix the price of a set commodity and or item. Whether we're talking about a booster box, a comic book, a coin, a video game, an antique, doesn't matter what it is. That's all that price fixing is. Next, let's talk about cornering the market. Now, this is something that a lot of people over-exaggerate because a lot of your pop culture-based collectibles that are still being mass-produced today are obviously not good candidates to attempt to corner the market. For instance, I would never advise somebody to attempt to corner the market on Funko Pops or Amiibos or modern mass-produced Pokemon or Magic the Gathering products. The print runs are way too high. It would be nearly impossible. That's why I always have to laugh when somebody will put in the comment section, well, Sean, I'm going after this one ultra-rare Magic card. And I have to laugh. Is it on the reserve list? If it's not on the reserve list, why are you even trying to buy out the market on that particular item? And Rudy with Alpha Investments has done some great videos on this in the past. I suggest that you watch them because he's very knowledgeable on market manipulation. Make no mistake. And a lot of his videos that talk about that are priceless. Well worth watching. Cornering the market works well if there is a known limit to the amount of supply that's out there. For instance, to use an Amazing Spider-Man 129 as an example, let's say that you have a lot of money and you want to start buying up copies of Amazing Spider-Man 129 in 9.6 condition. You could attempt to do that. And in some cases, it may actually cause the price to rise. If you miscalculate, though, if demand really isn't there and organic, and you attempt to do that, you could also spend a lot of money on a frivolous pursuit where you can lose money in the end as well. So that's an example of cornering the market. Another example I want to talk about is cross-product manipulation. I saved this one to the end because most people don't watch the full videos that I produce. So I really want to go in depth on this one. If you remember, there was a rookie card or a sports card that was traded for a Nintendo World Championship gray cartridge. Well, the sports card was valued at a significant amount. The Nintendo World Championship cartridge, up until that point, was not valued anywhere near what that sports card was. Well, by making a trade for that particular item or telling you they made a straight trade for that item, we don't know if cash was exchanged in addition to the item. That was not revealed, but just by putting it out there that that trade took place, automatically increased the value of the Nintendo World Championship gray cartridge. And if you don't believe me, if you look on eBay right when that trade went down, sellers who had those particular items, meaning the Nintendo World Championships, the gray edition, started adjusting their prices right after. This is a prime example of market manipulation. Prominent dealers, prominent auction houses will sometimes engage in this, where they will trade a commodity, collectible, investable asset to another, and in turn, the trade looks a little lopsided. But what it does is it causes price memory, so collectors go, well, that item they traded for was worth 100 grand. Therefore, obviously, this item that they traded for is now also worth $100,000. When in all actuality, that's not true. They're manipulating the market to ensure that that new item is going to now be worth $100,000. And a lot of the Timmies and the Poindexters out there get excited whenever they see that because they don't understand the idiosyncrasies as to how and what is happening on the market when that transpires. I give a lot of credit to Pat the NES Punk, who was actually one of the first YouTubers to do a video on this. And I did communicate with him about that particular video. I don't think he'll get mad at me saying that. And I thought it was a great video. I really give him all the credit in the world for doing that little snippet that he did on his podcast, because it did shine a light on this pretty much this topic that's not really discussed in the trade overall. There are more examples on price manipulation in the antiques and collectibles trade, but given that this video is at 22 minutes now, I'm going to end the video, and I will pick this up at some point in the future and give you even more core examples of cornering the market, of collectible bashing, of the pump and dump scheme, of runs, of ramping the market, all these topics that we discussed today. If you do consider these videos helpful, please let me know by either liking the video or leaving me a comment below so I know if I should make more videos like this or if I should make less. I know some people are not happy that I'm putting this information out there, but as I've said before, anybody with an education in economics, finance, and who understands the antiques and collectibles trade is already privy to this information. Thank you for watching. Have a good night. Stay safe. And hello to all my new subscribers. Thanks, guys.